Listen,
What is that sound?
it's crying. We have to help it.
Shh, it's all right. Nobody is going to hurt you. Here, take the scarf.
Have you ever wondered if something out there, something not quite human, could feel the ache of missing a parent? Deep in the misty woods of Washington's Willapa Hills, 3 hikers stumbled upon a sound no one could explain. A strange, trembling cry that echoed like a child, but with a voice not quite human. What they found wasn't a lost boy. It was a young creature, no taller than a toddler, covered in reddish-brown fur, its eyes filled with tears, its body shaking, calling out for someone it had lost. A baby Bigfoot. And when the forest responded, with a deep, gentle voice that made the earth itself hum, they witnessed something no book or documentary ever prepared them for. A reunion, not of monsters, but of family. If this is your first time here, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? And more importantly, what's your name, dear friend? Because stories like this, about connection beyond words and species, deserve to travel far and touch many hearts. Let this be a little moment of peace in your day. If you felt something, anything, click the like button and subscribe to join a gentle community of Bigfoot believers and quiet souls who still believe in wonder. The light was slipping fast. In the thinning gold of late October, the shadows of the Willapa Hills stretched long and cold, crawling like dark fingers over mossy roots and leaf-littered soil. Marjorie Klein stepped carefully over a tangle of slick roots, her boots pressing gently into the soft mulch of the forest floor. Every breath she drew tasted like wet pine and forgotten rain. Her wool scarf, woven decades ago in a shade of faded cranberry, hung loosely around her neck, fluttering just slightly in the hush between wind gusts. She was 62 now, but there were moments like this, just these, where her knees didn't complain, where the silence didn't press down so heavy. She had started hiking again after 20 years, not for exercise, not for company, just to feel something again. To know she hadn't turned completely to stone inside. The trail ahead curved through a tunnel of vine maples. Their last leaves burned orange and red against the falling dusk, like embers suspended in the trees. Somewhere behind her, she heard the soft crunch of boots. Troy, maybe 20 yards back, silent as usual. And even farther behind, the lightest, sprightliest steps. Lila Brooks, 17 and made of sunshine and nervous energy. Marjorie glanced up. The canopy above was thinning. Strips of pale sky showed through, blue already turning slate. It would be dark in half an hour, maybe less. Her hand found the cool metal of her thermos clipped to her side and reassured herself it was still there, still warm. In the stillness of the woods, even small routines mattered. Then it came, a sound from just beyond the curve of the trail, low, drawn out, like something stuck between a cry and a moan. Too sharp to be wind, too human to be coyote. Marjorie stopped. Behind her, Troy's footsteps also ceased. A pause. Then Lila's voice, barely above the breeze. "Did you hear that?" No one answered. The cry came again, longer this time, with a strange lilt to the end. It echoed through the trees, not bouncing clean like animal calls usually did, but trailing in and out like it had shape and direction. Marjorie turned slightly, her hand unconsciously reaching for the silver locket around her neck. The sound had a rhythm, not just a wail, but pulses, wavering tones that reminded her, God help her, of her daughter, of Jamie when she was little, when she used to cry in her sleep. That thought struck too hard, too fast. She staggered a half step. Troy had already moved up beside her, his face unreadable beneath the low brim of his waxed canvas hat. His pack was bigger than the others. Always was. Emergency gear, he said. Always be ready for worse than you expect. He didn't look at her, just stared toward the source of the sound. I don't think it's a kid, he said flatly. Could be a person. Could be someone trying to lure. Lure. The word hung heavy between them. Lila stepped closer, brushing damp hair from her temple. It sounded scared. Scared things can still be dangerous. Troy's voice was firm, but not cruel, just practical. That was the kind of man he was. He didn't say more, didn't fill the silence. Marjorie took a breath, long and deliberate. Her fingers touched the locket again. It had been 17 years since Jamie walked out. No letters, no phone calls, just a photo that came in the mail once. A baby she'd never met. The sound rose again, louder now. But something was different. The way it bent around trees. It didn't echo like a bear or bobcat. It moved, literally moved. The group exchanged glances. Did it? Lila started but stopped. No one answered. The crying had changed distance. First far, then near. But the forest hadn't rustled. No twigs broken, no underbrush stirred. It was like the sound was being placed, not made. They started walking again. Not fast, carefully. Marjorie took the lead, despite Troy's hesitation. There was something in her gait. Not stubbornness, but resolve. She'd come into this forest not to lose herself, but to remember. And now the forest was whispering back. The trees thickened ahead. Tall Douglas firs, maybe a century old, loomed like cathedral columns. The undergrowth grew dense, sword ferns, salal, and rotting logs that steamed faintly in the cooling air. Marjorie ducked under a branch, boots squelching in the wet loam, and paused. The crying had stopped, just gone, as if the sound had been swallowed whole by the forest. No breeze, no birds, no insects, only the faint buzz of blood in her ears and the ache in her throat she didn't know she'd been holding. Lila came up beside her, eyes wide and unsure. She looked small in her denim jacket, even smaller with the way she clutched her flashlight. Troy's steps came last, deliberate and slow. Something knows we're here. Marjorie didn't answer. Instead, her gaze drifted to a thick patch of brush just off trail, a bramble-tangled corridor barely wide enough for a person to slip through. Something about it pulled at her, like a whisper with no sound. She took a step toward it. Troy hissed low. "Wait!" She didn't. She stepped into the brush, ducking the thorny arch, one hand brushing the moss-covered edge of an old rotting log. Lila followed, her flashlight trembling just slightly in her grip. Behind them, Troy cursed under his breath but followed. Branches scraped jackets, thorns caught on sleeves. The air grew cooler, damper, as if they'd passed through some invisible veil. The brush opened. Before them, nestled at the base of a massive tree, its roots wide and sheltering like arms, lay a hollowed-out space no bigger than a camping tent. Dry, somehow, insulated by ferns and the thick skirt of the tree's base. The earth here was soft and padded. Like something, had been sleeping there. Marjorie froze. She hadn't even seen it at first. But there it was. A shape, curled, small, covered in matted auburn hair, tangled with pine needles and silt. Its shoulders shook in shallow, rapid breaths. Its eyes, two dark, liquid orbs, stared straight at her. Not animal, not quite human, something between. Its hands, small, long-fingered, clutched the edge of a rotting bark shelf like it was a crib. The moment stretched like silk about to tear. No one spoke. And then the sound came again, but this time not a cry, just a quiet, whimpering call, breathless, high-pitched. It sounded like Ma. Lila made a sound in her throat and took a cautious step forward, kneeling slightly and offering the water bottle from her pack. "Hey, it's okay, sweetie. Here." The creature flinched back, pressing hard against the tree, letting out a sound halfway between a sob and a bark. The water bottle slipped from Lila's hand and rolled toward it. It screamed, not loud, but sharp, like feedback from a radio, thin and painful. Not pain, not fear, recoil. Lila instinctively sang. Just a soft hum, some old lullaby her grandmother used to sing while snapping beans on the porch. It screeched again, louder, this time shaking all over. "Stop!" Troy said quickly, stepping forward, his hands raised. "The pitch! It's the sound!" Marjorie didn't move. She didn't hum, didn't speak, just stood. Her eyes locked onto the creatures. It stared back, and the forest hushed. A heartbeat passed. Another. Then the little thing stopped crying. Its chest still rose and fell rapidly. But it wasn't screaming. Its eyes were wide, fixed on Marjorie. She didn't blink, didn't smile. Just stood, her face softening, just slightly. One side of her mouth twitching in a way that hadn't happened in years. The thing blinked once, then again, and settled. Only then did Marjorie take a slow breath in, like waking from a long, slow dream. A wind rose through the trees. The canopy whispered. Night had arrived. They couldn't leave it. They all knew. And from somewhere, far, but not far enough, the forest answered. A new sound. Low, heavy, steady, like something walking on two legs. Something that was coming. The last trace of sunlight slipped behind the hills, and the world turned cold. Their breath showed now, ghosting in the dim air, vanishing just above their lips. The smell of damp leaves thickened. The moss looked darker, the earth softer underfoot. The ferns here grew taller than Lila's waist, and the light from her flashlight flickered as if even the batteries were unsure they wanted to keep going. They were deeper in than they realized. Or maybe just farther from anything that made sense. Troy kept glancing over his shoulder. Not like he was scared. He didn't seem like the kind of man who ever really got scared, but more like someone listening hard for a second sound, layered beneath the first. Like someone who had once heard something worse than what he expected, and never forgot. Marjorie moved slow but steady, her boots sinking softly into the damp mulch. Shoulders hunched forward, sent out of fear, but from the weight of not turning back. There was something in her chest she couldn't quite name, not since the moment that creature, whatever it was, had locked eyes with her. It wasn't language. It wasn't memory. It was something older than either. Like a string had been plucked between them. The sound had gone quiet now. No cries. No rustling, just the hush of the woods thickening around them like wet cloth. Then she saw it. The tree. It was massive. Older than the road they came in on. Older than the county, probably. A giant western hemlock, twisted and wide, its base splaying out in roots thick as truck tires. Its trunk was hollow at the bottom, the way storms and time carve out old giants. And right there, inside that space, tucked into the curve of two great roots like it had been placed there on purpose, was something small, curled, shivering. It looked like a child at first, but as the flashlight caught more details, it became something else. Its fur was a deep reddish-brown, matted in places with dirt and pine needles, but not filthy. Its limbs were long, oddly proportioned, with small palms pressed flat against the wood. Its feet were bare, long-toed, calloused. It couldn't have stood more than 2.5 feet, maybe 3, but its back was hunched, trying to disappear into the shadows. Its face was what stopped them cold. Not animal, not human, but caught somewhere in between. Wide black eyes, shimmering like wet stone. No whites, just depth, just dark, reflecting the flashlight back in glints of amber. The skin around the eyes was lighter, grayish-pink and smooth like the inside of a wrist. Its nose was flat, not like a dog's, more like a child's. Broad nostrils flared slightly as it breathed, ragged, like it had been running. Marjorie didn't move. Neither did it. Lila inhaled quietly and crouched down, her voice so soft it felt like it belonged to someone else. "Hey, are you hurt?" The creature's gaze darted to her. Its mouth trembled. It had lips, thin, pale. Its chest rose in quick bursts, and for a moment it made a noise. Not a cry, not a growl. A sound that could have almost passed for coughing, but sharper, with a vowel buried in it. Something like, "Ba, ah." She slowly unscrewed the top of her water bottle and pushed it forward across the moss. The plastic scratched lightly against the bark floor. The little thing recoiled, letting out a sudden whimper that rose fast, high-pitched, pained. It pressed itself deeper into the base of the tree, one hand out like it meant to claw at the air. Marjorie held up a palm. "Don't. Let it come to us if it wants to." Lila hesitated, then nodded, pulling back. "I thought water would help." "It's not just scared. It doesn't understand. Or maybe it does, and that's worse." Lila swallowed and, almost without thinking, began to hum again. Just soft, just a melody. An old tune from her childhood. A lullaby about stars and winter and safe beds with warm blankets. The reaction was immediate. The creature curled tighter, its mouth wide, its teeth showing. Not sharp, not animal-like, but human baby teeth. Tiny and yellowed. It made a sound like a whine and squeezed its eyes shut. Lila stopped humming, her face crumpling. Troy stepped forward, careful not to snap a branch underfoot. He crouched. Not too close, just low enough to be level with it. "Listen," he said, not unkindly, but clearly. "Some animals, especially the ones we don't see often, they don't like certain tones. Sometimes it's the pitch, or the rhythm. Could remind it of something." "What kind of something?" Lila asked, still watching it. Troy didn't answer. He just looked. Then the creature's head turned slightly. Its eyes caught Marjorie again. There was no panic this time, no flinch, just staring. A kind of stillness fell over the hollow. She didn't speak. She didn't step forward. Just opened her stance a little and softened her face. Not into a smile, but into presence. A kind of offering. The little one blinked, slow. The crying stopped completely. It sat up slightly. Not fully. Just enough that one tiny hand came away from the bark, trembling slightly, and rested on its own knee. A breeze stirred the ferns. A few dead leaves drifted down from the canopy above, brushing Marjorie's shoulders like hands. And then the air changed. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it. The kind of pressure you feel before a storm, or when someone steps into a room behind you before they speak. She didn't turn. She knew the others felt it too. Troy's hand went to his flashlight but didn't turn it on. Lila looked back into the woods the way kids look at the hallway when they know their parents are fighting in the kitchen. The creature in the hollow leaned forward, slightly. Its gaze shifted past them. Its shoulders tensed. Then a low sound came from its chest. Not a cry, not a growl. Something soft and hopeful. It still didn't move. But Marjorie saw it clutch something in its hand. A twist of fabric. Red and gray. Soft. Her scarf. When had it? She hadn't noticed it fall. But it must have. Somewhere in the ferns. And the creature must have taken it, held it, curled around it. She didn't speak. Just took a step forward and crouched, slowly, easing one knee to the damp ground. Her joints protested, but she didn't mind. The creature looked at her. This time, no panic, only breath. Their eyes locked again. It was as if some current passed between them. Not words, not thoughts, just wait. Recognition, and then it shivered. A long, drawn-out tremble that rippled through its limbs. It looked like it might collapse forward, but didn't. Just steadied itself against the tree and curled tighter around the scarf. Marjorie exhaled through her nose. The cold had sunk in now, truly sunk. The night had thickened. The air no longer just smelled of rain and cedar. It held the promise of frost, the kind that crept down from the hills and settled in quiet bones. "We can't leave it here," Lila said quietly. "No," Marjorie replied without hesitation. "But what if it doesn't want to come with us?" Troy stood slowly, scanning the woods again. "Then we wait," he said. "But we don't leave." The little one didn't run, didn't cry. It just sat in the cradle of that ancient tree, holding a piece of Marjorie like it had always belonged to her, like something old had wound its way forward through time, through silence, through loss, and found a way to touch her again. No one spoke for a long time. The wind passed overhead like a sigh. Somewhere far off, a low echo rolled across the valley. Not thunder, not quite. It didn't matter. They weren't going anywhere. And in that stillness, Marjorie remembered something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Not since the last postcard came. The kind of hope that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't demand anything, just sits quiet in the dark, holding on to something warm, even if it's only a scarf, even if it's only a maybe. Because sometimes that's all there is. And sometimes it's enough. The dark came faster than they thought it would. 1 minute they could still see the contours of each other's faces, the faint glint on pine needles, the curve of a mossy boulder just ahead. The next, gone. It wasn't like a curtain falling. It was like a breath had been pulled from the forest, and the color with it. Cold seeped up from the ground first, then down from the trees. Wet cold, not wind. The kind that gets in your boots and behind your ears and makes your bones feel like someone else's. Troy clicked on his headlamp. The beam cut a clean path through the ferns, but everything outside of it swallowed light like a mouth. Lila held her flashlight two-handed now, close to her chest. Her breath came fast, and she kept looking over her shoulder even when she didn't realize it. Marjorie stood nearest the tree. The little one, still curled into the roots, hadn't moved much, but it was no longer shaking. It held the scarf tight, bunched in one hand. Its other hand rested flat on the bark. Marjorie noticed it wasn't crying now. It was making these soft little noises. Not sounds of fear, not quite comfort either. Something else. Repeating, deliberate. She leaned a little closer, knees creaking. The scarf had slipped slightly. She could see its mouth moving, like it was whispering to the forest. Like it was calling. Not to them, to someone else. She looked at Troy. "He's not waiting for help," she said. "He's asking for it." Troy didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the black just beyond the reach of his light. He tapped the flashlight once, then again. Old habit. Checking, listening, measuring the silence. Then he heard it. A step, but not close. Far. Maybe 30, 40 yards. A crunch, wet leaves, heavy soil, something shifting its weight like it didn't care about staying quiet. But not rushing. Deliberate. Like it knew exactly where it was. Troy turned the beam in that direction. Nothing. No shape between the trees. No eye shine. No snap of movement. Just stillness again. And silence. The little one stopped making noise. Lila's fingers tightened around the flashlight. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," Troy murmured. "Could be a deer," she offered. "Deer don't stop when you light them up." Another step. Same wait. Same pause. Then stillness again. Marjorie turned slightly. Not panicked. Just present. The kind of quiet a person learns after years of waiting on something that might not come back. She knelt near the child, not touching. Just close enough to feel the space between them. She saw the creature's breath shorten, not in fear, but urgency. Then it made the sound again. But, low, fragile. Her breath caught in her throat. The tone. It wasn't crying anymore. It wasn't trying to scare them. It sounded like a word, or the start of one. The way a toddler learns shape and sound before they know meaning. "Bah! Ah!" Marjorie whispered, not knowing why. "You're not lost, are you? You're calling them." The creature blinked. Once, slowly, and its hand pressed the scarf closer to its chest. The forest around them felt different now. Not empty, watched. Not threatened. Measured. Then Troy's light caught something. Not movement. A mark. Up high. On the trunk of a nearby cedar. 8, maybe 9 feet from the ground. Deep gouges in the bark. Vertical. Rough. Uneven. But intentional. Not made by claws. Not torn in a panic. Like someone had marked a height. Troy walked toward it slowly, raising his light. "Not a bear," he said under his breath. Too wide, too straight. He ran his fingers along the marks. It's a sign. Lila stepped closer, glancing up, like someone wanted us to know how tall they were. Or remind someone else, Marjorie said softly. A message. The air grew colder again. The child let out a sudden whine, high and clipped, and pressed into the base of the tree. Its little chest heaved fast. Its eyes flicked toward the dark beyond. Troy's light caught something again. 2 small reflections. Eyes. Far. At least 30 feet away. Still, just hovering there, suspended mid-air about 8 feet up. Not moving, just watching, then gone. In less than a second, he swung the light back. Nothing. He didn't speak. No one did. Not right away. The kind of silence that comes when your body hasn't caught up with what it saw. Like the forest itself had closed its eyes again. Marjorie reached into her jacket, pulled out a granola bar, still in its crinkled wrapper. She held it out slowly, palm open. The child didn't move. Lila crouched beside her. "I think he's waiting," she said. "For what?" "I don't know, but I don't think we're who he's been hoping for." They all stood quiet again. The cold was in their clothes now. Damp, settled in, and the wind was rising, low and steady, not a gust, but a pull, like the whole hillside was exhaling through the trees. Then the child began to whimper again, not panicked, not desperate, just low, like it knew something was close, like it could feel it before any of them could. Marjorie looked up at Troy. "We can't stay here." Troy nodded. "We take him. Carefully, slowly." "Where?" Lila asked. "Back to camp or somewhere warmer. Just not here." She looked down at the small creature, trembling against the roots. "He won't want to come," she said. "Not until—" "I know," Marjorie whispered. "But we can't leave him for whatever's out there." Troy crouched slowly, set his pack down, and opened a side flap. He pulled out a soft wool blanket, dark green, thick, folded tight. Military issue. He laid it out beside the creature and didn't reach for him. Just placed it gently down. Then he stepped back. The little one stared at it, then at them. It shifted, knees drawing in, fingers curled. It looked like it might cry again, but didn't. Instead, it reached for the blanket with the same careful hand it had used on the scarf. Like it wasn't sure this was real. Then it sat back. Still shaking, still small, still waiting. And somewhere, far behind the trees, a sound came again. Not loud, not threatening. Just wait. A step, then nothing. The light caught nothing. But every part of the forest felt full now, like it wasn't just being watched, like it was being measured. Troy adjusted the light beam again, scanning the slope ahead. "There's a trail that curves around the ravine. If we move fast, quiet, we can get higher. Maybe signal out." Marjorie nodded. Her hand hovered near the child, not grabbing, just offering. The little one didn't flinch this time. It didn't move either. But it didn't look away. And Marjorie saw, in that small space between knowing and not knowing, something ancient. Something older than fear. The kind of trust that isn't given, only returned. She whispered, "It's okay. We're not here to take you away, just to keep you safe. Just until—" She didn't finish. Didn't need to. The child let out a long breath. Just one. And for a moment, just a moment, the forest exhaled too. But in the stillness after, the cold came back sharper, the dark deeper. They had to move. Troy took point. Lila stepped next. Marjorie brought up the rear, the child in her arms now, wrapped in wool and trembling but silent. And behind them, somewhere unseen, something very big, kept pace. Not chasing, not hiding, just coming. And it hadn't said its name yet, but it would. The forest wasn't done speaking. Not yet. There's a kind of darkness that doesn't just come from the absence of sun. It crawls in slow, thick, and wet. It listens back when you breathe. And on that slope deep in Willapa Hills, with the little one trembling against Marjorie's chest, they all felt it settle in like a second skin. No one was talking anymore. Even the leaves weren't moving. The wind had quieted down, but not because it had stopped. More like it was holding its breath too. Like the forest was waiting for something. listening. Then it came. Not from ahead, not from behind. From somewhere not far enough. A sound that didn't belong to any animal they knew. A long, low call. Too deep for a coyote, too round to be a wolf. It wasn't growled. It wasn't barked. It was sung. But not for them. It rose from the shadows like it had always been there, and only now decided to make itself known. It shook the needles in the trees, moved through the marrow in their bones, and landed in the earth under their boots. It wasn't just loud, it was full. Troy froze mid-step. His hand had been tightening around the flashlight, but now it dropped slightly. Lila clutched the strap of her backpack. Her eyes widened and didn't blink. The child went still. Then it exhaled, just a tiny sound. Then another, short, clipped. A breath that trembled at the start but softened at the end. Its shoulders, tight against Marjorie's arm, began to loosen. Not all the way, but like something in its chest recognized the call and felt safe. It pulled the scarf tighter but shifted its head toward the dark. Then again that sound, a second call, lower this time, drawn out like a bow on cello strings. It didn't echo, it saturated. Marjorie didn't move. Her back ached from the way she was holding the little one, but she didn't dare shift. The child wasn't scared anymore. It was waiting, listening, breathing in rhythm with something it couldn't yet see but already knew. And then, without sound or signal, it leapt. Not in panic, not in fear, just instinct. The child wiggled out of the blanket, slipped from her arms, and hit the forest floor in one fluid motion. It didn't stumble, didn't hesitate, just turned and began to move. Low, quick, quiet, toward the sound. Troy raised his hand, but Marjorie grabbed his wrist. No, he looked at her. It's okay, she whispered, even though she didn't know if it was. The child slowed only once, looked back at them through the ferns, eyes bright with something beyond language. Then it turned and slipped into the dark just beyond their light. They didn't follow, not right away. Then Lila moved, just a step, then another, and Troy sighed, low and quiet, and walked behind her, scanning the trees with every inch. Marjorie came last, slower now, her arms suddenly empty in a way that felt familiar and terrible. The path curved gently, lined by twin trunks. Tall Douglas firs spaced just wide enough for one person to walk between. Their bark was furrowed deep, and old moss lined their sides like time itself had painted them green. There, between them, a figure. No motion, no sound, but it was there. Taller than any of them, broader, upright. Its outline barely caught the edge of their light, enough to mark the frame, shoulders like stone, arms long and low. The face, if it was a face, was buried in shadow. But it stood still, not crouched, not watching, just waiting. The child had stopped, just a few feet ahead. It didn't run, didn't cry. It stood in the middle of that narrow clearing like it had always known that was the place it was meant to stop. Then the sound came again, this time, not from far, not from behind, from the figure itself. It shifted, just slightly, and it called out. But the tone had changed. 3 notes, lower, then higher, then soft again, almost melodic. Not a word, not human, but close. A kind of tone you don't forget. A pattern, a signal. One that isn't spoken but lived. Like a lullaby passed down without lyrics. Like a ritual sung without ceremony. The child made a sound in return. A chirp. Short, bright, delighted. It skipped forward, arms swaying as it ran. Not like a human child, but like something caught between muscle and memory. It didn't run fast, but it ran sure, into the shadow of the bigger one, and stopped. The large figure didn't crouch, didn't lift its arms. It just stood there, and waited. Marjorie felt her breath catch in her throat. Her body wanted to move. Every inch of her mother heart pulled forward, but something older held her back. Something sacred. Some invisible line she hadn't earned the right to cross. Then the large figure lowered its head, just slightly. Its arms moved, slow, steady, and wrapped the child into its side. Not possessive, Protective. Troy didn't speak. His eyes never left the clearing. Lila's breath hitched audibly, and the sound of the child's chirps, short, rhythmic, rose again, then settled. The forest stayed silent. No birds, no crickets, only wind high above, threading through the tallest pines. Marjorie felt tears in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them. She let them fall. There was something ancient in front of them, older than stories, older than names, and it was holding something it loved. Then the tall figure turned, not all the way, just enough that one amber eye caught the beam of Troy's light. It blinked and didn't look away. No fear, no challenge, just recognition. Then it did something none of them expected. It nodded, once, slow, measured, a gesture that felt like the closing of a circle, like the end of something, and the beginning of something else. Then the wind shifted. A gust blew down from the ridge, rustling the treetops, bending the ferns. The light flickered. When it steadied again, the tall figure was already stepping back, into the dark, still holding the child, still moving slow, but fading, like fog. The chirping faded with it, and when silence fell again, it wasn't hollow. It was full, the kind of silence that fills you up, the kind that leaves a mark. Lila took a step forward, stopped. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. Did anyone else feel that? Marjorie nodded. All of it. Troy's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. There was nothing else to say, because something unspoken had just passed between two worlds, and it hadn't broken anything. It had built something, and even though the child was gone, the warmth where it had been, wrapped in her scarf, breathing against her heart, had not left. She placed a hand over her chest and stood still and listened one last time. But there was no need. The forest had already said what it came to say, and it wasn't done yet. It was only just beginning. The beam from Troy's flashlight wavered slightly as he shifted his weight. His boots sank a little into the moss-padded ground, soft and silent, like the earth was holding its breath. The clearing had a strange shape to it, almost too perfect, carved by time and weather and the absence of noise. The space between the two massive firs had become something else. It wasn't just woods anymore. It had become a kind of stage, a threshold. The moment held. The wind had stilled again, but the air felt alive. The trees leaned just slightly, like witnesses. Their branches arched overhead, not quite touching, their tips trembling against a sky that had turned from blue to iron. Moonlight filtered in unevenly, casting slants of pale silver across the ferns. And there, in the center, stood the figure. No longer a shadow. Now they could see him. 8 feet tall, maybe more. Not hunched, not animalistic. Upright, wide-chested, thick-limbed, covered in fur that looked like it had grown from the forest itself, deep auburn in some places, streaked with silvery gray in others, heavy and tangled at the shoulders, softer at the arms. His presence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like gravity, like the forest had tilted ever so slightly in his direction. And at his side, tucked in close like a child beneath a parent's coat, was the little one, safe, still holding Marjorie's scarf. The adult's head turned slowly, not mechanical, not stiff, just cautious, intentional. His face emerged into the edge of the light, and it stopped them all. His features were not what the world had drawn in books or whispered around campfires. There was no snout, no animal glare. His brow was heavy, but not brutish. His nose wide and flat, nostrils flaring softly with each slow breath. His mouth was closed, lips relaxed, slightly downturned at the corners like he was carrying something old. His jaw was square but not rigid, and his eyes, God, his eyes were amber. Not glowing, not monstrous, just warm, intelligent, watchful. He didn't blink right away. He didn't need to, because he wasn't looking at them with fear. He was weighing them. Then, without sound or cue, he did something none of them expected. He lowered himself, one knee, bending slow, steady, until it touched the soft earth. His other leg planted firm, body leaning forward ever so slightly. A gesture that was not submission, not surrender, but reverence. Lila's mouth dropped open just slightly. Marjorie didn't move. Couldn't. Her heart clenched, not from fear, but from something deeper. Recognition. She had seen that posture once before, not in the forest, but in the hospital years ago, the day Jamie was born, when her husband had knelt beside her hospital bed, one hand on her swollen fingers, tears in his eyes because love had come into the world and made everything quieter for a while. That's what this was. A moment when something ancient remembered how to bow. The little one stepped forward, his small feet silent against the ground, and leaned into the adult's chest. Not like a human child. Not clinging, just leaning, pressing his small forehead against the taller figure's ribs. The adult's arms wrapped around him, long, careful, one hand wide enough to nearly span the child's back. He brought the child in close, one palm cradling the back of the small head, and began to stroke. Slow, repetitive, like a lullaby in motion, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Marjorie felt it break in her. A sob, small, swallowed. She covered her mouth, but it didn't help. The tears had come, hot and full, from somewhere she'd locked up so long ago. Her knees felt unsteady, her shoulders trembling. Not from cold, from release. That touch, that single, quiet gesture, was the kind of comfort that didn't need explanation. It was the touch every child remembers, long after the words are gone. The kind of touch you search for in dreams. And it wasn't just some creature doing it. It was a parent. The adult held the child for a long moment, then loosened the grip just enough to look down into his face. There was no sound between them, but something passed. A silent rhythm. A reunion. The child's eyes darted sideways, toward Marjorie, still holding the scarf. The adult followed the gaze and looked directly at her. The moment stilled again. The light buzzed softly in Troy's hand. The only sound was the distant rustle of some owl taking flight, wings brushing against pine. Then the adult did something that made the world feel too full to hold. He looked at her and slowly, deliberately, nodded. Not a big gesture, just once. A small incline of the head, and in that movement lived more gratitude than any sentence could ever carry. Marjorie nodded back, eyes still wet. She wanted to say something, anything, but she didn't dare break the silence. Not this kind. Lila moved beside her, slowly, like walking across a church floor. She placed a hand over her heart, pressed gently. A motion that meant I see you. I honor you. I understand. The adult shifted his eyes toward her, and there was a pause. Then the corners of his mouth barely lifted. Not a smile exactly. Something older, a softening, a kind of peace. Then he rose. Not fast, not slow, with the same care that a mountain might rise from the mist. The child clutched the scarf in one hand, still close against his chest. The adult stood tall again, looked around the circle once more, at each of them, then turned and began to walk, back through the trees, each step deliberate, balanced, shoulders squared, head high, no hurry, just return. The little one trotted at his side, not clumsy, just light, the scarf swinging gently with each movement. The forest opened for them. Branches leaned aside, ferns bowed. The trail was not marked, but it knew them. Marjorie stood still for a long time after they vanished. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was whole. She closed her eyes, listened, heard nothing, but somehow everything. Troy clicked off the flashlight. He didn't say anything, just let out a long breath and looked at the ground. Lila sat on a mossy rock and wiped her cheeks with both sleeves. They didn't move for a while. No one rushed the moment. The night stayed still. It was the kind of quiet you don't get back if you talk too soon. When they finally turned to go, Marjorie lingered last. She looked into the woods one more time, not searching, just remembering, then followed. And behind them, in the stillness of the trees, something lingered. Not sound, not shape, but the memory of a father's hand, of a child returning home, and of 3 strangers who saw something they weren't meant to see, yet were allowed to, not because they earned it, but because, somehow, they were needed. And the forest always knows the difference. The silence didn't leave with them. It lingered. Even after the figures had vanished into the dark beyond the tree line, the air still hummed with whatever had just passed through it. Like the ground itself was holding the echo of footsteps no one else had ever been allowed to hear. Marjorie stood there longer than the others, her breath unsteady, arms aching from where she had carried the child. Her scarf was gone, still clutched by that little hand as it disappeared into the night. But something else remained. A weight. Not heavy, not painful, just full. Troy didn't say anything. He never did when words weren't needed. But he adjusted the strap on his pack, looked toward the slope ahead, and gave the faintest nod. Lila sniffed softly and wiped her nose with her sleeve, then slung her backpack on with both straps. The wind had returned, but it was softer now, threading between trees like it knew how to leave things untouched. They began walking again. Quiet. No one asked which direction. It wasn't instinct exactly. But the trail ahead, barely a trail, more a thinning of ferns, seemed like the right way. The forest opened in front of them, bit by bit, as if the woods had seen what they'd seen and decided to let them out gently. They didn't speak for a while. Not because there was nothing to say, because the moment hadn't ended yet. The trees grew taller as they climbed, but thinner. The moss grew brighter in their flashlights, glowing faintly like it remembered sunlight. Branches swayed above, barely whispering. It was colder now. The kind of cold that didn't hurt, but reminded you that morning was still far away. Then Marjorie saw them. The tracks. Not human, but close. She knelt, shined her light sideways, low to the ground to catch the indentations in the soil. A wide foot, 5 digits, deep set, spaced far apart. The print curved gently left, as if guiding them. She didn't call the others over. She just stood again, looked ahead. They were being led. Troy stopped beside her. He saw them too, then said softly, "He's making sure we don't get lost." Lila tilted her light ahead, catching a bend in the narrow path. "Or he knows something we don't." They kept walking. The prince continued, always just far enough apart to make you believe the creature had covered the same ground minutes before. Not hours, no mud smeared, no rain washed them away. Just clear steps in soft forest floor, always forward, always just beyond the light. Then the slope curved right, steep on one side, drop off on the other. Troy stopped first, raised his hand. Marjorie stepped beside him and immediately saw it. If they had kept left by instinct, they would have stepped right over a false trail, a patch of moss barely hanging onto the edge of a 20-foot cliff. One wrong step, and someone would have gone down the side into brambles and boulders. But the prince had turned right, just before it. Lila blinked hard, her hand gripping the front strap of her pack. That wasn't a lucky guess. "No," Marjorie said quietly. "That was a choice." They moved on, slower now. Troy scanned every foot of path ahead, even when the prince disappeared for a few yards and reappeared again after a fallen log, like the trail was playing games. But it wasn't. It was careful, measured, protective. Then something shifted in the quiet. Marjorie felt it first. The prints were gone. They stood in a low clearing, the trees thinner now, the stars blinking overhead in patches. The light of the moon washed the ground in soft silver. But there were no more tracks. Nothing in the mud. Nothing in the moss. Gone. Troy turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. Lila stepped closer to the center of the clearing, looking around in circles. "Did we lose him?" "No," Marjorie said. Her voice was softer now. "He's ahead." "How do you know?" "Because he wants us to walk the rest alone." They stood still. Then Troy turned toward the far edge of the clearing, a gap between 2 boulders. Not wide, but just enough for one person at a time. Beyond it, the forest darkened again, but the trees didn't look the same. They were older, narrower, clustered close. He stepped through first. The others followed. On the other side, the path turned again, gently upward. The earth grew firmer, less moss, more pine needles. The wind changed, and then they saw it. A trail marker, old wood, faded paint. A white triangle nailed to a split cedar post. Official, human, a trail the maps had missed, or maybe one that had never been charted. Troy ran his fingers over the weather-worn surface. The paint had peeled, but not all the way. Still enough to recognize the marker. It pointed east, toward their camp. They hadn't been walking in circles. They'd been guided home. He looked back once, just once, and in the distance, at the edge of light, barely visible beyond the tree line, stood the figure. Still, not hiding, just watching. Then the wind swept across again, and when Troy blinked, it was gone. Lila stepped beside him. "Do you think he knew we were lost?" "He knew," Marjorie answered before Troy could. They walked the trail in silence for a long time, each step lighter than the last. The trees began to open wider, and the slope gently rolled downward. Somewhere in the distance, maybe a mile or two ahead, was the edge of the forest, the trailhead, a parking lot, a gravel road, the place where things became explainable again. But they weren't there yet. The prints never returned. But they didn't need them. The forest felt different now. Not tame, but familiar, as if it had watched them carefully, and decided, maybe just this once, to let them leave. Marjorie paused near a low rock wall, built years ago by someone long gone. She placed her hand on the cold stone, let her fingers rest there. She could still feel the warmth from when the child had curled into her. Could still feel the slight weight of him, the way he had leaned his cheek into her collarbone, how his breath had tickled the fabric of her jacket, how he'd stopped crying not because someone had hushed him, but because someone had finally come for him. She looked back into the woods. No movement, no sound, but she knew he was still watching, still walking somewhere farther in, not gone, just where he was meant to be. Troy adjusted his pack again, clicked off his flashlight. The moon was enough now. No one asked to stop. They kept walking, each footstep softer. And even though the trail grew clearer, none of them rushed. Not because they were tired, but because they had crossed something. Not a border, not a line, but a threshold. One that didn't show on any map. One that asked nothing from them, but gave something back anyway. And none of them wanted to be the first to speak. Because when the woods show you grace, you carry it quiet, like a promise, even long after the path is behind you. The forest thinned without warning. 1 minute, they were still wrapped in the hush of trees, thick with bark and shadow. The next, they stepped into openness, a stretch of land that felt like breath after holding one too long. The moonlight was stronger here, not brighter, just clearer, as if it had waited for them, just on the other side of everything they couldn't explain. Ahead, the trees stopped. Not abruptly, just respectfully. They opened into a sloping meadow, soft with pine grass and pale bark, where the world felt paused. A place where even the animals didn't bother to hide because nothing here hunted. It wasn't a place of secrets. It was a place of return. Marjorie felt it before she saw anything. Her body shifted, slowed. Not from fatigue, from reverence. The kind of quiet her soul hadn't known it needed until it stood in it. The silence here was deeper than the forests. Not hollow, not expectant, just settled. The trees behind them swayed in rhythm with wind that didn't reach the ground. The tips danced. The roots stayed still. Troy took 2 more steps, then stopped, like something in him said this was far enough. Lila followed, slower now, arms crossed over her chest, eyes wide, not with fear, but awe. The air tasted different, not cleaner, just older. And that's when they saw him again. At the edge of the clearing, just where moonlight met shadow, he stood. Not hidden, not revealed, just present. The tall one, the father. His silhouette was sharper now, shoulders broad, arms relaxed. one hand resting against the trunk of a bare-barked pine, the other curled gently around the bundle in his arm. The child, still holding Marjorie's scarf, still watching. They didn't move. Neither did he. It wasn't a standoff. It was a farewell. Marjorie stepped forward first. Only one step, then another. Enough to make it clear that she saw him, that she understood. The large figure slowly turned, just enough to square his chest to her. The moonlight caught his profile, fur flecked with silver, face still unreadable, but eyes visible now. Amber under night sky, glowing only because they reflected what was given, not because they needed to shine. Then, without sound, he lifted one hand, palm in, fingers curled slightly. Then he brought it to his chest, laid it flat, firm. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't a salute. It was a gesture of truth. Marjorie felt her own chest tighten, and before she could think, her hand mirrored his, rested flat over her heart. Across the distance, in the stillness, it was enough. Lila stepped up beside her, her hand following the same path. No instruction, just instinct. Then the child stirred. It shifted in the tall one's arm, lifting its head, eyes flicking across the clearing until they found her. Marjorie! He blinked once, then reached out his small hand, not away, not to be held, but to show the scarf. It had been folded tightly now, cleaned in some way. The dirt was gone, the edge smoothed. The little fingers rubbed the fabric once, then held it against his chest, as if to say, "I remember." Marjorie smiled without meaning to, and for the first time since the child had left her arms, she exhaled fully. The father shifted again, and this time he knelt, one knee to the earth. The child stepped down. The motion was deliberate, graceful, like water poured from a bowl. It didn't wobble, didn't run, just moved forward on quiet feet, not breaking a single twig, not rustling a single leaf. The child stopped halfway between the trees and the humans, looked at each of them. Then slowly, quietly, it placed the scarf down on the grass, not as a return, as a gift, a piece of the in-between. Then it stepped back. The large one moved forward again, gathered the child without sound, and turned toward the trees once more, but not before one last gesture. He glanced back, only briefly, and gave the smallest nod. Not goodbye, acknowledgement. Then they slipped into the trees like they had always belonged there. Not hidden, not escaping, just home. The grass waved softly behind them. The moonlight shimmered in stripes, and the wind picked up, finally reaching ground level. It brushed their cheeks, tugged at sleeves, moved their hair gently, not pushing them away, but reminding them that they still had a path to finish. Marjorie stood for a long while. Then she knelt, slowly, and picked up the scarf, folded now, but warm, still warm, not from the child's body, from something else, from the space between what was given and what was understood. Troy finally spoke, his voice low, rough from hours of silence. He let us walk away with something. Lila shook her head. No, we didn't walk away. We were walked out. They turned together, quietly stepping back toward the trail, following the last stretch of the moonlit ridge. No one rushed. The forest behind them no longer watched. It had returned to itself. The ground grew firmer underfoot. The pines thinned. The air picked up the scent of dirt roads and dry bark. Somewhere far ahead, beyond a bend, the dim glow of the trailhead lantern would be flickering in a box on a wooden post. The kind rangers only refilled once a month, but even the thought of it felt distant, like something from a different life. When they passed the last set of trees, the ones that formed the natural archway framing the end of the unmarked path, Marjorie turned once more, and for just a heartbeat, in the black between branches, she thought she saw a hand, not waving, just resting, still watching. She blinked. It was gone. The trail ahead was clear. The gravel of the parking lot was visible now. Their van, parked at the edge, still alone in the darkness. The stars overhead blinked silently, as if they too had seen something sacred and dared not speak of it. When they reached the vehicle, no one spoke right away. Troy unlocked the door, tossed his pack into the back, sat on the driver's side with the window down. Lila stood beside the open door, arms wrapped around herself. Marjorie climbed into the passenger seat, scarf still folded in her lap. She didn't unfold it. She didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy now. It had changed. It had become a space where nothing had to be filled, where absence didn't mean loss, where the unknown could sit beside you, quiet, and still be trusted. No one looked back as they pulled away. They didn't have to. The forest had never been behind them. It had always been around them, and always would be. And in its deepest quiet corner, somewhere a child curled against his father's chest and fell asleep to a night song sung in a language older than sound. A song of return, of forgiveness, of grace in silence. Morning came soft. No dramatic sunrise. No golden beams slicing through treetops like in postcards. Just a steady blue light spreading low and wide across the Willapa hills, brushing against pine needles still heavy with dew, nudging the fog back into the valleys where it belonged. The cabin sat still. Steam curled gently from the stovepipe above its slanted roof, rising into the cool air like a breath finally exhaled. The porch creaked once, then settled. Somewhere inside, the smell of coffee slowly filled the rooms, wrapping around old wood and wool blankets like it knew its way home. Marjorie stood barefoot in the kitchen, wrapped in her heavy cardigan, hands cupped around a mug that had belonged to her mother. The mug had a crack near the lip that had never spread, like it too had simply held on. She wasn't drinking yet, just holding, breathing. It had been only hours since they'd returned, and yet the forest outside the window felt farther than it should have. Not in distance, in weight. She turned her head. On the windowsill, just above the sink, sat the folded scarf, still slightly creased from the child's hand, still faintly warm, though she knew that made no sense. She hadn't unfolded it. She didn't need to. Instead, her eyes drifted to the tree line beyond the meadow. Mist still clung to the branches. Birds hadn't yet begun their full song. It was that hush between night and morning when nothing wants to go first. Then she saw it. Barely there, just beneath the edge of the first row of trees. A glint. She narrowed her eyes, stepped to the screen door, opened it quietly, and stepped outside. Her feet sank slightly into the damp earth. No wind. Just that soft kind of stillness that feels earned, like the forest knew they had passed through something sacred and decided to let it settle before speaking again. She walked slowly, each step measured. Her robe swayed slightly with her movement. As she neared the tree line, she saw it more clearly now. Not a rock, not a branch, something shaped. At the base of the largest cedar, the same one she'd once read a book beneath when her daughter was 5. There, placed gently on a flat stone, was a carved object. Small, worn smooth. She knelt. It was no bigger than a lemon, shaped like a teardrop. The surface had been sanded with care, so smooth it caught the moisture from the air and held it like glass. It fit in her palm like it had been made for it. A single groove ran down one side, not decoration, not random. A mark, a trail, a reminder. It was wood, but barely smelled like it. As if it had come from a tree that remembered water more than bark. Marjorie turned it in her hands. She didn't cry. Not yet, but the tears sat close. Her fingers traced the groove once. Then again. Behind her footsteps, Lila, wrapped in an old green flannel, still sleepy, her cheeks flushed from the cool. She crouched beside Marjorie and looked down. Her voice was low. "Is that from them?" Marjorie nodded. "It wasn't here last night." Lila leaned in. "It looks like a drop of water." Marjorie turned it again. The way the light caught it now, it shimmered. Not brightly, just enough. "A tear," Marjorie said quietly. Lila looked at her. "Or goodbye," she added. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. Marjorie stood and carried the carving back toward the cabin. She placed it on the mantel, just beneath the old clock that hadn't worked since 1986. Let it sit there. Let it breathe. Troy came in later, hair damp from a morning rinse at the pump. beard fuller than it had been when they started the trip. He didn't speak when he saw the wooden gift, just nodded once, and that was enough. They packed slowly, each movement quiet, not solemn, just deliberate, like they didn't want to jar the piece still hanging in the corners of the room. Marjorie found herself folding her things more carefully than usual, as if the folds meant something, as if neatness might hold memory better. She picked up a pad of stationery she hadn't touched in years. Her hands paused. She stared at it, then pulled a pen from the drawer, sat down, and began to write. Dear Jamie. Her hand trembled, just a little. She hadn't written her daughter in almost a decade. Not since the last Christmas card came back unopened, but this time felt different. Not because she expected a reply, because the part of her that had been afraid wasn't anymore, and the part that had shut the door had watched it open again. She wrote for a while. Nothing dramatic, just truths. I saw something in the forest. It reminded me what it means to protect something small, to wait, to hold still, to let go. She folded the letter slowly, placed it in an envelope, and set it on the counter beside the teardrop carving. The forest outside had begun to shift, not louder, just alive again. The birds had started singing, soft, then bolder. A warbler, maybe two. A hawk's cry somewhere up the ridge. The day was moving forward, gently, without force. As they loaded up the van, Lila turned to look once more at the trailhead beyond the trees. Her eyes narrowed, like she was trying to memorize the way the grass curved, or the way the light hit that last tree. Then she whispered, Do you think they're watching us? Marjorie closed the back hatch of the van and smiled. Not watching, she said, just remembering. They climbed in. The tires crunched over gravel, the cabin shrinking behind them with each bend in the road. The hills stretched out in front of them, green and gold and blue all at once. The sun crested slowly over the eastern ridge, catching the windshield with a warm flicker. No one talked much during the drive. No need. When they hit the edge of town, Marjorie pulled out her phone. No signal yet, but that was okay, because some messages were meant to travel slower. She looked out the window one last time, past the trees, past the road, and for a split second, just above the tree line, she heard it again, faint, low, not a cry, not a warning, a sound that lived somewhere between music and memory, a final note meant for no one and everyone at once. She didn't speak, she just listened and smiled, because love, even the kind we don't understand, always finds a way to leave something behind. In the quiet corners of the world, deep in the woods, beneath old canopies and above beds of fallen leaves, there are moments that remind us how much life can still surprise us, not through spectacle, not through noise, but through silence, through stillness, through a gaze held too long or a sound too gentle to name. Sometimes the most powerful truths don't arrive with answers, but with presence. This story, though set in shadows and wild places, was never truly about what we could see. It was always about what we could feel, the ache of waiting, the weight of memory, the unspoken promises we make when we choose kindness over fear and connection over control. It speaks to a part of us that's older than language, a part that still believes in grace, even in the dark. There are times in life when the path forward is unclear, when we feel lost in the thickets of our own hurt, our own silence. And then, just when we stop looking, something reaches back, not to rescue us, but to walk beside us, even for a short while. That's the nature of true encounter. It doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be held, gently, with both hands. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not a grand gesture, not a neat ending, but a scarf, folded and left behind. A carving of a teardrop, smooth from time. A door reopened. A letter written, not expecting a reply, but because something inside you is ready to speak again. In a world that often asks us to be louder, tougher, faster, this story offers something else. The radical act of slowing down, of listening, of believing that some bonds can form without words, that compassion can echo longer than fear, and that even the most unlikely of connections, across distance, across difference, can change the shape of our lives. What we carry with us matters, not in our packs or our pockets, but in our hearts. The forest doesn't need to be tamed to be understood, and not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be witnessed, with wonder, with humility, and with a deep respect for the unknown. So if this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone, or something, or a piece of yourself that needed to feel seen, let it sit with you a little while longer. Let it breathe. Let it become part of your story too. And now, dear friends, we'd love to hear from you. What stayed with you? What moment spoke the loudest, even in silence? Leave us a comment below. Your thoughts, your feelings, your reflections. We read everyone. And if stories like this one speak to your heart, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Join our growing circle of listeners, thinkers, and dreamers. Help us build a community where quiet stories still matter, where compassion still leads, and where the forest never stops speaking. Thank you for walking this path with us. We'll meet you again, somewhere between the trees,